nerds, what's up? It's that time again. It is time for me to announce my Spfbo 9 finalist. Exciting stuff. If you're new here and you have no idea what Spfbo is, I will point you to my video where I explain what it is, but essentially it is a competition put on by author Mark Lawrence to help prop up self-published fantasy and find the standouts. So today I'm gonna go do mini reviews of each of my semi-finalists picked by my wonderful helpers, and I will also be listing their dedicated review in the comment section below because they did full, really great in-depth reviews of all of these semi-finalists. And so definitely if you're interested in any of them, go check out their reviews. Now, one more thing before we get into it. This year was a really good year. In fact, most of my semi-finalists I rated as high or higher than my last year finalist. Now, if you're one of the authors this year, you're probably like, cool, awesome. I get that kind of sucks because a lot of Spfbo is just kind of the luck of the draw, and if you get put in with a really strong batch, and another year you would have been put in with a weak batch, you might have been a finalist, it's hard. But overall, for everybody else, this is really positive news. Like, I really enjoyed my semi-finalists, and it just goes to show like the increasing quality of a lot of the self-published fantasy out there. So just always gotta put that plug in. Okay, I've talked enough. Let's get into my mini reviews. The first one I'm gonna talk about is The Price of Power by Michel, and that was picked for me by Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and please go check out his full review. The Price of Power is really interesting because I think this was probably one of the most hyped semi-finalists I had in my group. It has a lot of attention and people really love this book and have compared it a lot to Abercrombie and his character development, which obviously you guys know I'm a huge Abercrombie fan. This was actually a semi-finalist I ended up not finishing for now. I really do want to finish this book. So this is a longer book. So I read a little over 30% of it, and that was about 250 or a little more than 250 pages. So I read like a decent chunk of pages, and I just was having a really hard time getting invested in the characters. Something about the way that the writing was just kind of, it just wasn't quite pulling me in. And so I took a break expecting to go back to it, and then I read some of my other semi-finalists and I finished them all like very quickly. And so when I kept trying to go back and read more, it just like, I just kind of kept bouncing off of it. And I'm just kind of convinced if I keep reading it, I will eventually like it. But due to the constraints of the competition and, you know, the time constraints we're under and kind of the purposes, at this point I was like, it's not really serving me to force myself to read this book right now if I'm really just struggling with it. Again, because I've heard so much about how good it gets and how deep the characters get, I think if I'm in a better space mentally to like read it and kind of push through, I will probably end up loving it. So many people have loved this book. So I feel it's really hard for me to like admit that I just bounced off it after about 30%. So please go read Andrew's review of it. Go read the stellar reviews. It's just probably, it just wasn't working for this year for Spfbo for me. The next book I read was If Light Above by Lily Ann Crowe. And this was chosen to me by Leslie of The Nerdy Narrative. Again, I will link her full review below. I enjoyed If Light Above. It was a really nice, kind of fast-paced, quick read. I liked the main characters. I thought they were really interesting and kind of different. Like you had this war veteran, which I don't see in the way it was written in this book a ton, and there's a mystery, and it's kind of a whodunit murder kidnap mystery, and it was just really well paced, really well plotted. I read it pretty quickly. I was invested in what was going on. I was invested in the different characters. I would say my only complaint about If Light Above was kind of in the latter quarter, I'd say, like the last quarter of the book. Some of the characters started acting in ways that were clearly convenient for the plot. Like I could tell that the author needed these characters to work together, but I felt that the way those characters were written, that probably realistically they wouldn't work together that quickly. And I recognized, but it was because, you know, at some point you have to move the plot forward. And that was the only thing about this book that made it feel a little younger, because I wouldn't say it struck me as YA until that started happening, because I noticed in a lot of YA books, sometimes plot conveniences happen just for things to move along. And so I wish kind of in the ending, maybe there was more time to flesh out those interactions. But overall, I can see people who just like, you know, a nice fantasy read with likable characters and mystery that you can kind of solve as it goes. It was just like such a solid read. So I enjoyed A Flight Above, and I definitely recommend it if you like things that kind of hover in between the adult YA range with some unique characters. The next book I read was Daughter of the Beast by E.C. Greaves, and this was chosen to me by Dom of Dominish Books. And again, you can see his full review in the comments below. So Daughter of the Beast was really great. From page one, really just captured me, though, and kind of never let go, kept me on. It is a very unusual book, and I mean that in the most positive way because I like unusual books. It instead of like a book, you know, that kind of like goes and kind of has like this climax and falling action, it was like every part of this book was just building. Like it was just this constant rise, and you kind of didn't know where it was building, but you could tell it was building up towards something. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but it just felt like a very kind of unusual pacing for a book that I enjoy. Like I hadn't read it a ton before, and that's something I've noted about other SPFBO books, is that because they're self-published, I think a lot of times they're able to play a little more with atypical plot pacing. The other thing that was interesting is when I first opened Daughter of the Beast, I noticed it was in first person, which I can struggle with first person depending. But what I thought was really interesting about this book is, in my opinion, it was clearly very, very intentional of the author to choose first person because it made the scope so limited. And because we are following a young girl, how she changes over these few formative years of her life, the limited way it was written really hit home. Like it really developed her character because you're really seeing through a young girl's eyes and what is happening, and you don't have that outside kind of more third person omniscient presence. And so I think it worked really well for the narrative, even though I tend to be a little bit more wary of first person. I kind of, in some ways, I had a little bit of similar of a problem as with Flight Above in the last quarter of this book. I felt a couple things were resolved too quickly, just for personally, but it was a pretty light criticism. I really enjoyed this one. Next up, I read Necrotown by Alexander Nader, and this was chosen to me by Jordan Reeds, and I don't think she's done her dedicated review yet, but I will link her channel. But it's funny because when Jordan chose this book, she was like, look, I really like this book, but I am kind of concerned you are going to hate it. And I was like, cool. And I totally see why she would think I would hate this book, because it is like urban fantasy, and it definitely has like a very certain lighthearted tone that maybe people would associate with like the Dresden Files, which I wasn't like a huge fan of. The first book anyway, don't come for me there. But anyway, I was just like, I really enjoyed this book. And I'm kind of surprised by how much I enjoyed the book, to be honest. I just think the author did a great job. Like, it is this urban fantasy setting, and the main character is kind of like that vibe of kind of like a little silly, like a little kind of a certain way. But I just thought the author did such a good job of threading the needle of how to keep the book kind of lighthearted, fun, but also serious enough to make me invested. And I've struggled with past books in general, like if they don't quite nail that tone. If you start too silly and then get serious, or start serious and get silly, well, that was a tongue twister. Anyway, point being, I thought the author just like really walked the line very well, where the tone was consistent through the whole book. And so I was invested in what was happening, and I just really liked it. And I liked the two main characters a lot. And particularly their relationship. This is actually something that's asked from me a lot for recommendations, so listen up if this is you. It starts with a married couple who are happily married and stay in a happy relationship the whole time. And people always talk about how that's like very rare in fantasy. You usually see the buildup or the breakdown, but it's like there's a lot of drama in this book, but the drama isn't about their relationship. And so I always like seeing that. It was just different, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised how much I liked Necrotown. I was like, oh, I just really enjoyed this. I read it very quickly. I was invested. I would say my one criticism of this one is it reminds me of criticism I had of Brandon Sanderson's second secret project, the handbook, the Medieval Wizard's Handbook to Medieval England. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Medieval England. I never get that right. Here's the book. Which I said, you know, when you have a main character who kind of has like these big flaws or has a lot of self-confidence issues, and how quickly do those get resolved? And now this is the first book, I think, in a trilogy. It's in some sort of series. So I completely understand that this is going to probably keep getting developed. But I did feel there were a couple things about his character, some of the insecurities that character had, that felt either like both too resolved and a little unresolved. Like I wish it could have just been fleshed out slightly more, especially in terms of his relationship with his wife, because his wife is really awesome and I love her, Fox. She's a great character. And so I was kind of like, sometimes I was like, why is she with him? Like I wish I could see a little more of that. But otherwise, I mean, it's a very small complaint because I liked the book. It was good. And finally, my last book was The Exile of Zanzibar by Daniel Maidman, and that was chosen for me by Pete from Ponderings of Pete, and I will also link his dedicated review below. You guys get what's happening right now. So The Exile of Zanzibar was another really unique read. The writing style was very strange. I'm trying to think of what to compare it to. It's almost like it was trying to emulate maybe more of an epic, of kind of a myth. It wasn't typical prose in the way you would tell a story. It really felt more high level and more archetypal, and it just kind of intrigued me. Like, again, when you make a choice like that and it was done pretty well, there were a couple times that might have pulled me out, but it was done pretty well. And so to have that kind of style of book or that style of writing in this sort of fantasy setting just really captured me. Again, I'm always someone who's captured by something that just feels different from the mold. And because of that, though, the characters feel also more high level, at least for me personally. I know a lot of people felt differently about that, but I felt it was kind of high level. But I think it worked for the narrative that was being told. I think Exile maybe was a little long for what it was. Because of that kind of style of writing, I think it would have worked a little better, just shorter in my opinion. But I was fascinated, especially by Claire, our main female character, and how she interacts, and just again, the kind of mythic quality that the book had, I thought was really interesting. And if you like unusual reads, I think this is kind of a cool one to pick up. Okay, I feel like I've been just going way too long. So without further ado, we are going to announce my finalist, which is the most fun part of the competition. So drum roll, please. My finalist for SPFBO 9 is Daughter of the Beast by E.C. Greaves. Guys, I really just loved this book. I haven't stopped thinking about it, to be honest, since I finished it. It really was a book that captured me from the first chapter and never let go, and was the book that I was literally just the most eager to sit down and read. I just always wanted to read it, you know, like a book you just sit down and you're like, I gotta know what happens next. I was really attached to the main character. I really love the way that she is developed so naturally over the story and how her story changes based on the circumstances she is in. It just felt so natural. It just was a great book. I really liked it. So I got a little overexcited when announcing my finalist and realized I never even said the rating I was planning on giving it. So Daughter of the Beast is my finalist, and I am giving it a rating of 8.5 out of 10. And I am very excited for the author, and I hope you guys pick this one up and enjoy it. And I hope you guys look and pick up the other finalists. I think it's gonna be a super great year. I can just tell by the way everyone is talking about their finalists that we all really believe in them, and that's pretty exciting. So I hope you join us on the SPFBO 9 journey. Congratulations to my finalists. I am sorry to my semi-finalists. You guys all wrote great books. Again, I highly recommend many of these books. I rated them all pretty well, so I think you couldn't really go wrong if you look at any of those books and it sounds intriguing to you. I'm guessing you'd probably like it. Just a lot of well-written stuff in my batch all around. As always, if you want to continue following the competition, you can follow me, follow the people that are in my group because they are amazing booktubers. And you can go over to the Facebook SPFBO group to kind of see what's going on over there. And I'll see you next time. Bye.